relationship is manipulation. This was a comment, not by me, from a friend of mine in college. Yes, she had just gotten out of a toxic relationship where she and her partner brought out the absolute worst in each other. And yes, as a result, she made a commitment that she would never, ever have another romantic relationship, ever, until a couple of years later when she got married. Anyway, her comment, though, really made me think, are relationships all about manipulation? In our society, we see manipulation as something that is negative and even coercive. But technically, manipulation is a neutral concept. As humans with needs, we try to get those needs met in both healthy and unhealthy ways. And needs in and of themselves are not a negative thing. But I digress. My friend's declaration that every relationship is manipulation was both unsettling to me and too much of a generalization. There's way more to relationships than the healthy or unhealthy actions of each individual. So I'm going to change my friend's comment into this one. Every relationship is relational. That helps clear things up, doesn't it? What I mean by this is that relationships are defined by connection. Relationships are greater than the sum of its parts. It is through relationship that God meets us where we are at. It is through relationship that God makes a way out of no way. Just like God made a way for Hannah in our Old Testament story from last week and today. As we have said, Hannah was one of two wives to a man named Elkanah. Elkanah's other wife was called Peninnah, and the Old Testament story tells us that Peninnah had several children, both males and females, but Hannah did not have any. In those times, a woman's worth and security were tied to her ability to bear children. Peninnah, we are told, rubs the fact that she has children and Hannah does not, in Hannah's face. And the story even says that Peninnah torments Hannah about this. It must have been a very stressful and miserable existence. And indeed, there were ramifications to a woman not having a child. A childless woman's social status would be lower than that of a woman who had children. But even more, if Elkanah were to die before Hannah without Hannah having a child, Hannah would be kinless. This means that having no son or son-in-law to support her when she became a widow, she would likely live the rest of her life in poverty. Hannah needed a child and wanted a child. When it was time to make the annual pilgrimage to the temple for sacrifices, Hannah goes to the temple with Elkanah and she prays to God for a child. She asks God to give her a child, saying that she will dedicate this child to the service of God. Eli, who's the priest of the temple, remarks that he hopes God does answer Hannah's prayer. And it is through Hannah's relationships that God makes a way out of no way, because Hannah does indeed conceive and bear a son, whom she names Samuel. Samuel, who is dedicated to a special relationship with the Lord, becomes a prophet and Israel's last judge. And in fact, he is the one who anoints David into kingship. Hannah is restored to her relationship with her community because of having a child, and she is restored to kinship as well. God, for Hannah, made a way out of no way. As with Hannah, God makes a way out of no way in today's reading of Matthew. It is the familiar story of the loaves and the fishes, where Jesus is speaking to a large crowd for 3 days. Jesus notices that the crowd hasn't eaten, and he expresses concern for their well-being. So Jesus tells the disciples to feed the crowd. Jesus is focused on the relational concern of people's needs being met and wants the disciples to respond to those needs. But instead, the disciples respond to Jesus by saying, "Where are we supposed to find bread in the desert?" They aren't focused on the needs of the people, but instead they're focused on limitations and lack of resources. Yet Jesus makes a way out of no way, miraculously distributing enough food from a few loaves of bread and pieces of fish to feed the people, meeting them where they are at, and restoring them as individuals and as community. As Hannah and the crowds of the followers and the disciples, may God continue to meet us in relationship, offering us abundance where we only see lack, making a way out of no way for us as individuals and as community. Amen.